We're live. I'm gonna
Good to see you.
be quiet.
Okay.
Haven't seen you all summer.
Yeah, so that,
Uh-oh.
yeah.
What?
So
You haven't seen him all summer.
Okay,
I
so
watched the idea,
10-5.
right?
Yeah.
Not
You
necessarily.
gotta go up there and see him.
Well, I was thinking about going up and trying 9 holes, but I'm not a very good golfer. I don't have any clubs. And
I got up to the driving range a couple times, not near as much as I wanted to.
Dollars? Okay, thanks.
So are you putting your house on the market? Or
Should we
you have
jump in,
somebody
or-
that's just
I already
knocked on your
sold it.
door?
all right,
Knock on
Attaboy.
wood. We haven't
Attaboy.
closed, so.
Yeah, so if you
Good for
do,
you.
last September, we did 10-5 up there.
Really?
500,
Nice.
Like right away?
1,000 more, just based on last year's numbers.
is it the post office person?
No.
24.
No, I just saw her today and told her if she's interested, she better make an
We're
offer.
already at 12.
Probably a little bit premature.
East 11.
Yeah.
She
I'm gonna
said
send a
she already
message
has
to-
an offering on some other house.
Sure, you can ask him.
Yeah, which is great, because we budgeted 127, or wait.
I've got another couple that's a couple wants to come on Saturday, so
24. maybe.
start bidding more. That's my goal.
Rebuild. Yeah.
We're just checking in with one more person and then we'll get rolling.
Yep. Sorry for keeping you
I was
guys.
say,
Sorry.
should we just roll since we
Doing
have
pretty good.
something else
Well, I
that
told
starts
him-
at
Doing pretty
6?
good.
I told him he could come. He should come down if he can.
Yep.
I think we just need to get moving.
before the snow.
So, all right,
We're
let's
doing
go.
pretty good.
All right,
Dive in.
we're gonna start with the golf course
Deep dive.
Okay.
so Paul can
Go.
be done and head out when we're finished. The expenses of the golf course start on the second page of the expense spreadsheet. And then they finish the top of the third page.
Do you have probably part-time staff that'll move into next year with you then? I know outside in Clubhouse, you kind of had midstream changes, right?
Yeah, you mean that'll be there for next year?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and the people that have been, they kind of went out of there, that's a positive for me. People that are there are good, very good.
Okay.
We got a gal that's from Kathy Johnson, I don't know if she'll be there, it'd be nice if she would, inside, she's very good, and, but she's like from the Schroeder area.
Yeah.
And she's cutting greens over at Superior National. So,
Okay.
I hope she stays.
Okay.
Eric Anderson is, he's been great. Yeah. And then I've got, because we have minimal staff there now, Cody, who's a young guy that's out on the turf crew, he can go in and run all the POS stuff, like, just great. So he's been helping, he's covering that for me right now, so
Okay.
that's really good.
So we want to focus on expenses first, and then we can talk about revenues and such. So the year-to-date amount that we're at right now is 116,778. This is as of August. Cool. All right. So is that, I mean, I know that we still have half a year of salary and stuff like that to pay on this. But it looks like, I mean, do you think that the budgeted amount, 201, are we gonna be a little shy of that? Perhaps? For expenses, or do you think it's gonna be all of that? Cause I'm just
Well, we know we'll be
curious as to-
shy of it because we didn't hire Paul right away. So there's not a full year of salary in the full-time side of this thing.
Okay,
But when we look at 2020, we won't be shy of that.
right.
the rest of those numbers, some of them, I don't see him spending all of it, but not a whole lot. And then, of course, down at the bottom, there's a 17,000 in capital that we're not gonna spend unless we end up buying some equipment at the end of the year here. We won't spend that, but it still is something that we're accumulating towards. So you can just count that 17 spent, whether it shows or not in this report.
Right.
So I see where we're making, I'll say substantial, just, it's not large amounts, but it is a big change. Clothes for retail, golf supplies for resale, those are dropping.
Yeah.
Is that because we
So we're,
bought too much this year?
No, we're just
We
not
don't
selling
have-
as much as we used to. Like, we're not carrying as much as we used to.
Yeah, I don't know if that's, from the people I've talked to that, that you can purchase materials and they can just live there for a long, long, long time. I just think we want to invest in things that you use for golf and that are more practical like that. And maybe you could have a couple articles, sweatshirts or like our hats, those sort of things. But as far as we've got some clothing that's been there all year. We've sold a couple pieces. It's just not. I think that from people I talk to that are in that business, they have strong league play, multiple leagues, and they have tournaments, and all the prize money has to go towards the clubhouse purchases. So, there's like a clear record of all those things going on. So they purchase a lot against those prize money, knowing that it has to be spent in the clubhouse.
okay.
So I don't know. I don't see it. I see it as not a good profit area.
Yeah, we can focus someplace else. So, I guess other than that, that was the same question I had, Kelly. Does anybody else have any other questions about that part of the budget there? I mean, everything else is pretty much just holding it straight from last year.
There's a few other things that deviated, but not a lot. And keep in mind that we put together the 19 budget without Paul,
Right.
and we don't really have a great feel for how it's going to operate yet in terms of staff time and supplies and other things. I think we're fairly close on these items, and so the budget next year is kind of similar to the budget this year.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to build a record of how it's going to work to be sure. So it feels conservative yet. Like we're probably not going to spend more than that. It should be what we need to get by, and hopefully we can come under it, but hard to say.
Right.
Yeah, revenues is probably a little more
Yeah.
where the action is,
Prescient.
huh?
Yeah, that's.
So that's the lower half of the first page is golf course revenues.
Which is, I mean, considering that we have another month, maybe,
Oh yeah.
to play golf. It seems like our budgeted amount is actually pretty darn close.
We were just checking that before the meeting. Last September 18's take was about 10.5,
Okay.
and October at 500. Let's call it 11,000 was what we will certainly make
Mm-hmm.
over the next month and a half.
Okay.
So that we could theoretically finish right around 124, 125.
And if we just match last year, and of course we're
Well-
ahead of last year.
If the weather's good, the conditions
Could be high.
Conditions are way, way better.
Right.
So it's very playable. Just hope for good conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to Mike Davies over at Superior National, he said that September's their biggest month as far as revenues. They do a lot of business.
Hmm.
Fall, people coming up for weed
Mhm.
watching and such.
Right. So how do we tap into that?
We'd
Well-
be open and be in good condition
Yeah.
and have people say good things about us.
Yep.
fair enough.
I think we're gonna tap into it, so that's what we're hoping for. That we updated the revenue budget before your meeting last week, and now that we have August numbers, that revenue budget feels pretty conservative as well. Like we just about already hit it this year. So if we're gonna beat that, what we have in there for the 2020 budget, we're gonna beat it this year.
Mm-hmm.
And assuming that the park board's going to talk about rates and different things, there's no reason to think we wouldn't also do that next year, maybe a little bit better. And also the fact that the conditions are better and the word's starting to spread, and we'll start thinking about advertising and all those other things. Well, this is a number I expect that we'll be raising before we're done, before the end of the year. So at least for me, the strategy is to leave it conservative right now. Before you have to set the preliminary levy, leave it at this lower number that you're sure you're going to make. And then as the park board has more time during the rest of the year to talk about rates and other things, we can get a little closer to what we want that revenue number to look like for next year.
So you're saying the 113
113, yeah,
Hmm.
which is what was in your
in the
packet
packet that we
last
had,
week.
that set the 4.83.
Yeah.
So
You can.
You know-
You don't have to do that. That's just my suggestion.
well, I mean, for a preliminary levy, I have no problem with that, because
Yeah.
that gives us some squish room as well, because if we make 125 to 130 this year in revenues, then that gives us 10 to 15,000 of squish room in that budget, which is a better place to be in than moving the other direction.
Mhm.
The only question that I have is that if we're expecting to make the same as this year or more next year, then, why don't we set that at what we're expecting to make this year, just so that we can, that would also be a conservative move, it just wouldn't be as conservative as putting this number here like this. I mean, that's totally personal preference, I don't really care either way, because I feel like we're gonna be revising that number any way we set it.
We did one large tournament for the Y last year, and
Mhm.
my understanding is they raised $7,000 at that tournament. Is that correct? Or
I don't remember
It
the
was- it
number
was a
off the top
reasonable
of my
amount, yeah.
head.
so that's a good day. I mean, there was a lot involved in that, but those are things that are beneficial for the city here, and other things that we can try to develop into two tournament-wise that are directly related to our end revenue. But the point is, I think the facility, as far as a asset for the city, is it's already shown that it's great for that purpose.
For doing tournament style play like that.
Yeah, and being beneficial to other businesses. It's just the fact that people are coming up there as a recreational activity and then staying in town, coming down here, spending money,
What about, question on the revenue side? I was surprised, I remember looking at this last year about the seasonal and the private cart fees. You know, how last year it was like $900 or $90, $30, sorry. So we budgeted $1,000. This year is $8,000.
Yeah, we recoded it. It was all included in the number above.
Okay,
In the
that's because
previous
I also
years.
noticed that those numbers
Yeah.
also equaled
Yeah.
about the same amount. So then what about like condition of carts that we have and like what, like where are we at on that?
Well, I think that the condition of them, we have the 8 electrics that everybody favors,
Yeah.
and they're, the newest and the most responsive.
Yeah,
And everybody prefers to use those. We have, they're in okay condition. They've got some, the seats are cracked and, stuff like that, but otherwise they're in fair shape. Batteries have been replaced, I think maybe 2 years ago, so they're, they have a little bit of life. Typically, from my understanding with municipal golf courses, electric is more of a country club choice and gas is more of a municipal choice. I'm guessing because of the serviceability or maintenance costs or whatever, but we've got a bunch of older Yamahas that are You know, they just kind of keep going. They, you know, we have 5 of them that look of the same vintage that look okay, you know, compared to the other ones that look, some of them look like they should just be back in the, you know, for the shop guys using, but
Sure.
people use them and, you know, it's better than walking, I guess, and, but, yeah, I've been kind of exploring the carts, and it's really interesting, because like, I thought I could maybe buy some used carts for $2,000 or $2,500. Well, I'm finding out that's not the case. They're, you know, the ones that are maybe 7, 8 years old even are, you know, like $2,800. But I found a source, like a rep that deals directly with the golf courses, and that's the way to go. So he's got we have something kind of in the neighborhood that's going on, and that's up at Lutzen. They're changing over to these brand new ones with all the bells and whistles and all the GPS and I guess the latest. But they've got, meanwhile, they have a batch of 2019s there, you know, that they have to bring back. They've got some ones that are like 2015s. And so I'm asking questions about the prices on these, and so the ones that are 2015s, I can get them from him for like $2,850. And that was kind of like the best deal I found. And then they said, well, what's the new ones? Well, the new ones are like $4,600. I'm going, well, you know, so he's talking about these 1990s or 2019s. They're just a couple months old up at Lutzen
Yeah.
for like $4,100, you know.
Mm.
And so, I mean, that's a lot of money, but it sounds, to me, it sounds like
Better deal.
I'm looking at it the other way, you know, like, it's not that much different from the $2,800 to the
Right.
$4,000 for what you're getting. I don't-
Are
So-
those all electric or are those gas as well?
gas.
Those are gas, yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause I know that's one of the things, I don't remember, I was thinking, have you talked to Scott Harrison? Or maybe you talked to Heath out there, is that who you talked to about him, or did you
No, I
talk
talked to the country
cart?
club rep,
Okay.
yeah.
Because I think that, like, at our last EDA meeting, that Scott had said something that they buy new carts, but they basically already arrange the sale of those carts, like, for whatever time frame in the future, like a couple years, whatever it is. And so they already have that, like, set price. So, you know, to a place that doesn't necessarily need brand new models, but, like, you know, so it's a way to, like, kind of continually update their fleet and whoever they're passing them down to, so they, like, kind of lock these
And
prices.
then they have an idea of what it costs them to run new carts, kind of like a lease, I guess, in a way,
Yeah.
except you're paying up front and you don't have the interest or whatever,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's really all about that block of money that's floating around. But to me, it's interesting, so you can invest in a used unit, and then what do you do with it? Do you just drive it into the ground? I don't know.
Right.
Or do you get a newer one and like you're saying, try to develop someplace to move those
Rotation cycle.
over 5 years or something?
Now, would the money for new carts, would that fall into the capital outlay
Yeah.
line?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's sitting at 3. Wait, no, I'm looking at both. Never mind. My bad. 9. So that would get you like two and
Doesn't work that way, though,
No.
right? You have to imagine
all the stuff.
how long are you planning on keeping those carts?
Right.
So that's the tricky thing. If we're buying these that are fairly new, are we going to keep them for 12, 15 years?
Right.
I mean, we're certainly keeping carts longer than that. So
Carts, you know, you talk to there's entities like the sales reps that can give you the better deals on the new or used stuff. And then there's the people that can also sell used stuff, but they make their living selling parts too. And they're telling me that, you know, these units, they've got units that are from the 2000 vintage that are still out in operation, you know. And I looked at ours, and ours are like 98, so,
yeah.
you know.
So
Just
then it's
keep
not.
trucking along.
So imagine we just are going to keep these 1919 or 2019 ones for 20 years, and they cost $4,000. Well, then we know how much per year per cart.
Right.
And we want 18 carts, then we know how much per year we need to set aside for having that many carts. And then we can think about how much we're spending on maintaining them, and then we need to look back at that revenue number and say, are we making enough money on these carts to have nice ones ever?
Yeah.
Or do we need to buy the cheaper ones and keep them for 20 years.
Yeah.
And for Superior National, of course, the carts, I don't know that they ever plan on making money with theirs. It's
Right.
just part of the package. Like, they're not going to sell greens fees without nice carts.
Right.
Whereas we will, obviously. People are riding those little Yamahas with no roofs still. And
Yeah.
so we're trying to find that sweet spot where we don't spend too much on it, but we spend our money wisely and have equipment that's going to last a long time. And
Yeah, and so that's where it really blows my mind, the cost of the new ones to the used ones. But the whole question there is having a secondary market to move those and then kind of keep in that slot, you know.
yeah.
Even if they're second or third hand-me-downs, if there was some cycle, because if somebody, some other, yeah, I don't know. That's all I was wondering is, I know there was at least one that we had to get out and push at men's league this year.
Yeah,
That's all right. It's kind of
yeah,
fun.
it's kind of embarrassing.
That's all right. It was men's league.
It's men's league.
Not as embarrassing as my
Yeah.
game that night.
It's not that long, of course. Those guys will make it.
No, exactly.
But, and you know, the curve on any piece of equipment, the what its value is declining sharply in the beginning of its life and then not declining as quickly. So even though there's not a huge difference between those for a couple of years, I would bet that those $2,800 ones are still the better bet for somebody who's planning on keeping something for a long, long time.
Sure.
So
Well,
you
how
don't have
much
to
do
carry
we
that.
have, so what we have in the budget here is what we want to put into, kind of set aside, or is that what we're willing to spend next year?
No, that's what, back to the equipment replacement schedule.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying the annualized cost of our fleet is, based on all the things we want in it, what we think they're gonna cost to buy, and how long we plan on keeping them. So,
I also heard something about, I listened to Dave on the radio this morning, so I feel like I'm prepared. The mower, fairway mower, is that something too? And that's in that equipment replacement cost, so that's $7,000.
Didn't we just buy it for
No, we just
green?
bought
We bought a Greensmore maybe.
no, we bought a fairway mower.
We did what?
Well, we bought that big orange thing anyway,
What?
and we finally paid for it last year.
Oh, okay, it's paid for, I
Yeah.
see. Yeah, it's still
Okay.
running, it's got a leak in it right now, we're trying to find,
Hydraulic leak kind of
Yeah.
thing.
mhm.
So this is a good time of year
Is it
for
fun?
us to come back and just go back and look at the fleet and our intentions about it and revisit the replacement schedule and make sure it still makes sense. And we've already started those conversations again.
Well, I'd be curious as to what Paul's thought is, as far as what you would suggest for replacement of carts. You know how many people are using them, how much I know the day I was up there for the YMCA deal, you ran out.
Yeah, I think, well, I guess just at a glance, you know, that what we're gonna get trading in what we have to anybody like a club car is gonna be insulting, really.
Yeah,
You know, that if we're probably better off keeping those units and then getting other materials, so if we have more, so if we do a tournaments, we have our own carts there, we don't have to rent them, or, because from our location, that'll never work out.
so you said we have 5 that are pretty much need to be put out to pasture?
Old school Yamahas.
Well, we've got like about 3 or 4 of those. Well, yeah, I think we do have 5 because we've got 2 back. We've got 3 that we're using, and then we've got 2 parked back for repairs. And, yeah, and then we've got some other Yamahas that are from the same vintage, but they're all like, because I put some information together and emailed it to the club car rep, and you know they're old, you know. But the thing is you know, if you can't get anything for them, you may as well keep them, you know, and then you can use them for whatever, you know. But
So how many carts do we have total, including the 8 electric and all the club cars? And,
well, operational now we've got 15.
okay, and so that number that I heard, 18, that's the number that you'd like to purchase?
Well, it makes
or
sense.
is that-
9-hole course, you got 2 carts per hole.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. right now, the feel of it is that we've been, when we're busy, you know, all the carts are out. And somebody comes in, they like a cart, well, here comes one down number 9, you know. But it's that close, you know, right now.
So are you
So we need to do
suggesting
something.
that we purchase an additional 18? Or is that just having 18 on hand?
Well, I'm thinking I don't think it would be bad to purchase more carts. You know, right now, to get to 18, we need to purchase, you know, 3.
In the spirit of the conversation we had about equipment replacement last week, I'm going to suggest that we push this conversation to a different meeting
Okay.
where Paul and Dave will actually come with a proposal about what they want to do, and you
Okay.
can look at it and ask questions
Okay.
about it.
Great.
Okay. Because all of that goes to
Yay, another meeting.
the capital.
It'll be a regular council meeting.
Okay.
Everybody's favorite.
Well, I mean, it's not to kind of address the elephant in the room on that one, on this particular conversation. Like, I believe that Paul, you've done everything we've asked you to do. You know, you got the course in good condition. It's been operating all summer long. I think that's fabulous. That's exactly what we asked you to do. You know, we're still looking at a deficit on the golf course, which we had expected. So the question that I have for the council then is what, you know, if we feel like this is a doable number, this is something that's a good idea for us, understanding that there is a pretty good possibility that the revenue for the golf course will be amended upward, and potentially the expenses would be amended downward a little bit. Probably not a ton, but downward a little bit. And then for 2020, we're expecting the expenses to hold pretty much where they're at. So that's the
Yeah,
question.
I just go back to, you know, we had the golf course task force as well
Mhm.
that met and talked about some things that we wanted to see. And again, number one was the maintenance and then hopefully improvement. We all know Mother Nature has a lot to do with it, of the condition of the course, which obviously that happened this year, that things were improved over what we had last year. I think moving into next year, we were hoping with the second year that if we could do that again, obviously the condition of the course is primary, but then the goal, I think, was to try to do a bit more advertising. We did do some updating to the clubhouse this year a little bit. I think that was still part of what the committee was hoping for, whether it's even just some new furniture, because what's in there is pretty antiquated, that gets updated. Food, that has been brought up before, and without a real kitchen, I know it's a problem, but for us to explore, what are some options? I did have feedback, especially from the Thursday night group, because there are so many, about, you know, kind of some options for that. I don't know if that has gotten better, but those were kind of things that came through in the task force as well. So those are in the back of my head as I'm looking at these things too, as to what we talked about. And Dave, you're aware too, because you were part of those meetings, so.
And we're not going to let our budget define what our goals are going to be next year.
No.
We have to still be fairly cautious with the budget because we just don't understand the operation enough based on this new paradigm to count on a particular number for loss next year.
Right, but
We're-
it's
but we
not
are-
the first time I've worked on budgets, so.
Yeah, but this, you know, we're hoping
Places that lose, so.
that we can, now that the season's going to come to an end, start talking about, all right, what's next, and what are the next things we're going to try and improve, and the things that you're talking about, and give the staff and the park board some time to, after the season, kind of think about, all right, how do we up our game again next year?
Yeah, but it's also, in my experience, this is what we've gone through in budget meetings, is to talk about what is the plan for next year? How many rounds do we think we're going to see? How many memberships do we think we're going to see? Based upon those numbers, then we're figuring out and calculating what's that expense, and the I shouldn't say the unknown, but what has to be then defined is what are we willing to spend in capital? So that's why I asked some of these questions. Yeah, you can come and say, here's what it is, but if I don't know what your plan is, if you're not telling me based upon this number, I think we're gonna have 400 rounds of daily golf through the year. This is how much they're gonna be. I mean, that's how we
Yeah,
should be figuring these things out.
agreed.
So,
And I just caution that we're probably 3 years from being able to do that well. And this year is the first year we've installed the point of sale system where we're feeling confident in the numbers we're tracking. And once the season's over, we'll get to go back and really think about what those numbers were. And then once we do it another time, then we'll see, okay, is this, do we have some reality here? And then it'll be that following year where I think we can finally have a good conversation around what's our expected rounds and how are we gonna build that up and when do we get them and you know, have a conversation about money that way.
Yeah. Well, I think that, yeah, I know what you're saying, and I think I understand, like, what you're saying too, Mike, is that because we haven't had any good way to track that side of, right, we can't say like, oh, we're gonna go for 10,000 rounds or 8,000 rounds, because we don't know how things have been entered in the past, but if
Mhm.
Paul's there now, and like,
We
you
can
know,
actually
like
track.
in the years of Mike, right, it was to track how things were done there. If there was a discrepancy from one year to the next, it seems like it was probably things were done the same way for a long period of time.
Right.
But when there's a change of, you know,
Yeah.
which doesn't really like help us plan, but it's kind of,
Yeah, makes this harder.
yeah.
Right. So for now, it seems like we've got some numbers. We know that we're going to probably be amending them as we get closer to the end of the season. The season closes at the end of September, or, you know, thereabouts, right? And then as far as preliminary, these numbers for revenues, okay, we can set that aside. We'll deal with that. And then for expenses, do you feel, Paul, that the budgeted amount for next year, the 205,404, that's going to cover what you think and you foresee as operations and capital and, you know, projects and stuff
yeah,
like that?
I'm kind of with Mike, you know, I'm just like trying to play it conservative and
Mhm.
trying to keep things on hold. I mean, there's a lot of things that would be nice to have for operations, but, you know, see what we can do with what we got.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about that? I mean, I know that kind of leaves a couple of things hanging, but where we're at right now, I think that that's probably where we have to be. Because we need to get some more info on the season, both expenses and revenues, in order to make a more final decision. If we're just talking about preliminary budget, if we know from what Paul's telling us that the amount of money that we're budgeting for 2020 is appropriate, then that's good. Then we know that. If we as a council feel okay with that, then we can move forward with that being the understanding, because then we'll understand what exactly we're agreeing to in future budgets as far as operating deficit and such. Anybody have any other thoughts?
Kelly?
She's shaking in her chair. It's like,
I'm gonna stay quiet.
I do feel like for the purpose of this meeting, I mean, I hear you.
No. I'm gonna stay quiet.
Okay, yeah. But for the purpose of this meeting, we need to know what we need for next year, you know, and put that in the budget, and then we can address that in the future. So as long as you feel that the number is what we need for next year, and there aren't any strong objections from the council and that primarily right now, then
Well, I guess that's my only thing, is like, if we do know, I mean, we didn't take any capital outlay construction, I'm assuming that's like, is that, oh, never mind. We did spend some, what's that $5,000 that we haven't used for 19? Capital outlay construction, is that construction of like the course?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
is that something that we have some money built up in a reserve for?
No, and it's probably not. I mean, this go back to the beginning of our golf course park board council session. There's not a robust capital improvement plan for the actual grounds out there. And we know we can make it work as is, but in terms of a long-term plan of how are we gonna keep it up and improve it and all the mechanical things that are out there.
Well, the 19
Doesn't-
budget was the first time we put any money in there for a, right, cap.
No, we've had it in there before. It's just, we're not real confident that it reflects, like, we know how we're gonna replace things like clubhouses and maintenance sheds and irrigation systems and stuff like that, so that needs to be developed still.
Well, pretty sure it doesn't.
And that, my understanding was that's something that's on the list of things we want to do, but it's not the top. The top was, let's get the condition right. The next is, let's start working on the advertising and other ways to make money, and then the next is, let's make this long-term plan work.
I mean, I guess that's my only thing. Granted, Paul and Dave have a much better handle on if that 2020 revenue or, if the numbers look right, but I guess that's my only thing is, does it make sense to put more money in there right now, knowing that by the time we have to set our final levy, we could come back down from that once we get some sort of information back from the park board? Because I feel like if we leave that right now, the expenditure side at 205, and there is like, the park board met and, there was, whether it's like we're gonna add 2 carts or we are actually gonna do some more updating, we wanna, put more money into the clubhouse. I mean, it feels like then we'd be at a spot where, and maybe that won't happen, and we could back that down, but we could, again, we tend to, we can't go up from the preliminary levy. So what if we, and whatever it is, whether it's $10,000 or $15,000 or $5,000, I feel like in hearing some of these things and that there is a plan, I feel like it's foolish to wait another year or to have to potentially not be able to do some of these other things that we want to do, because we have a lot of stuff we want to do as a council as a whole, but I don't know, maybe I'm
So you're
overthinking
suggesting
it.
No.
that for now, for the budget, that we include money to get the carts back up to where?
I'm
they
not
want to
saying
be,
it's
or-
carts, but I'm saying it's
Or
like getting the park board
equipment.
to, whatever that is, whether it's the carts or whether it's the clubhouse refurbishment or it's those things that were recommended by the golf course task force, like some of those things, like how the steps are gonna be. We know that like conditions improvement was the first thing, and like, I mean, we said this, but yeah, I don't know. We can always back it down if we get some sort of report back in December saying we don't need to do anything with it, then great, let's go at 205 and that's the number that we're gonna budget with. But if they do get together and we have allocated that money, more money in there by setting our preliminary budget higher, then we don't have to try and take that or find that from somewhere else. I mean, ultimately, it's coming out of it's coming out of revenues at the rec park. So
Well,
if something
it's not,
needed
I mean, revenues at the rec park are property tax dollars,
Right.
so it's coming out of property tax dollars. One source for this extra money is golf course revenues, and we've kind of left those what we think is artificially low in this budget for now. So we could come back in a week and increase both the revenue and the expense side and hold the levy
the same.
the same and still have more resources here. And I actually like that better because we eventually want to get to the point where the golf course is supporting itself more than we've represented in this budget, even with a realistic long-term capital
So
plan.
what's the 5-year history of our revenue?
Should be.
Those are things I'd want to see.
Yeah,
We
I
got
can
to
show that to you.
I want to, when we're doing this, I mean, in 2017, it was 127,000 for next year with a course that's been in good shape this year, should hopefully be in good shape next year. we're budgeting pretty flat right about what we've got this year, and I'd be curious as to see what our history is of at least 5 years, and then look and say, yeah, this year we know it was down because we had significant rain, or we had wind damage, or we had, or this year our revenue is way up because we did 3 tournaments that summer, which I know hasn't happened, but that's the kind of stuff that I want to talk about when we come to budget meetings is what's it historically been? How did you get to this number based upon what's your plan for next year?
Then we can do that in the rec park, and we can do that in the liquor store, and we can do that in some of our other revenue places. In the golf course, it's harder to tell that story because of how much change has happened in these past few years. We'll show you 10 years of revenue numbers. You can look at more if you want, and it can give you an idea of what the potential is out there. But it's hard to take those numbers and say this is our plan based on those numbers, because our plan's just kind of,
Well, yeah, and
180.
we're not asking them to be accurate within 5% or whatever, but historically, if we believe that hopefully next summer would be a good year based upon the number of rounds, we'd like to see this is what it's going to come out as. The job I had previously where I did a lot of this, we don't know how many visitors we're going to have to the community. We didn't know how many people were going to walk through our doors for services. If we planned only on locals, that didn't work. You kind of have to go by historically what's happening, what do we expect to see, how many tests, how many visits, and I don't see this being very different. And same thing, what are some of the improvements that you'd like to do next year that we know we need to come up with that expenditure and then can reflect? And that's where I feel we would come back and say, guys, we're looking at losing 100,000 here. What can we trim out? Or how can we increase revenue? Can you get this number to, let's lose 75, not 100, or whatever it may be?
Right. And-
That's been my history in budgeting, and then if it's really, really off, which it shouldn't be horrific, then you have discussions, but that's a check-in on a monthly or quarterly basis. So I think our revenues here are low. From what I'm hearing for this year, we've done really well, and I expect that there would be some growth next year. If nothing else, I would expect if we had the same numbers of rounds in membership, that our rates will probably increase a little bit. Even if you want to tell me, hey, we're looking at a 2% increase, then we should be putting 2% on top of what we're seeing for this year if we're thinking it's going to stay the same.
I would agree. I'm also not as concerned about the revenue side of it as I am on the expense side of it. Like what you said about the expense side of it, I would agree, is that we should put in all the things that we want to have happen next year, whether we're expecting them actually to happen or not. And then we can always trim it back, like what Anton, like both you guys basically said that same thing.
that's virtually what we're doing, though. I mean, that is what that budget has in it, is what we expect to do. We're not showing you the total cost of capital purchases, because we don't put those in the expense budget, those are depreciated over time. And we don't want to make decisions on an annual basis on what equipment we need. We need to have a long-term plan for that. It's the expense that we feel much better about. The revenue side, I want to have the conversation you want to have, Kelly, but we just don't know how much we're going to make this year. We don't know yet. And we can't look to the past to get a confidence level about this year, because it's just different.
Well, I don't want to look at the public and go, how did you come up with this, or what do you think, and go, I don't really know. I don't feel good about that. But,
Isn't the issue there with what you're saying is if revenues go up and then expenditures could go up as well and equal, so we wouldn't have any change in what the only downfall of that, right, is that if the expenditures had to go up and the revenues didn't also go up with what we could do, or that those things didn't match. And that's where I feel where that it's more just of an initial safety in there right now, putting that expenditure up and keeping the revenues where it's at right now. I mean, again, we could be positively, well,
I mean, 205 is quite a bit more than we've been spending here historically.
yeah.
Well, and at some point, we're gonna have to spend some money. I mean, if we want people to have carts, if we want a clubhouse that's still standing and those things, I mean, we
That's
know that we're gonna have to spend that money, and the public has told us they want the golf course there. So, again, then we have to find where the happy medium is, but, yeah, okay.
Well, and I think for the interest of time, and I know that that's a pretty shitty reason to move on in a conversation like that, but in the interest of time, I think that we should probably continue through.
Can we
through this.
get some, I mean, can we have, just before we have to start setting things, can we have more information if
Yeah.
from either the park board or whoever? It's you, are you just part of the park board when you're talking about the course, or is there a separate entity that looks specifically with the golf course and then goes to the park board?
The park board's
Yeah.
over me,
Yeah,
yeah.
What more information would you like to see?
well, I mean, I do like the fact that, like, you know, in 19, we did plug money in for capital outlays for both equipment, the clubhouse, and just general construction. Again, that's what we talked about, like, starting that process of being able to put that money in so things can be done and dealt with over time. And the fact that we carried that into the 2020 budget is good, right? So, I mean, I feel that we're at least moving in the right direction there. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we don't need any more information right now.
Okay.
See what it looks like when the year is wrapped up.
Okay. Are we starting at 6, the next one?
Yep. Let me show you two graphs to stay at the real high level on Dave's budget, and then we're just going to have to pick this up next week.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you
Paul.
very much,
Thanks, Paul.
Paul.
Thanks for hanging in there.
So this is trend analysis for Rec Park. The blue dotted line is the actual revenues. You can see this is now since 2007. There's a regression line there. The regression line, the formula that I don't know if you can read, but it's 52,710 times the year. So basically that's saying that line slope is going up $52,000 a year. That makes sense when you look at all those years together, but you can see sometimes the change is there and sometimes it's not, and sometimes it's more. So, and particularly these last few years, it seems to have slowed down some. So we've got one more chart, and that one is just 2016 to 2020. But you can see the slope is still $41,000 a year over those last couple of years. This is understanding a lot about our pretty flat occupancy, very busy at the park. We're staying very busy. And as the park board's making changes to rates, you can see it's being reflected in the performance financially. So in 2020, what we've got in there is
That's the budgeted amount for revenues.
this number, right? So that's even saying, you know, these past 2 years has even slowed down more than 40,000 a year. It's more like 20,000 a year that we've been growing that number at. We think we're gonna hit 1.2 million this year, pretty much right on. And we got 1.22 in the budget for next year.
Is your occupancy changing at all, or is this basically due to the rate increase?
It's both. Occupancy has changed. It's up. Small percentages a year, 2%. Back in 2015, 16, there was some 5% jumps. Like from 14 to 15, 15 to 16, there was both a combined, say, 5 to 6% occupancy jump and a 2 to 3% rate
Okay.
hike. But in the last 3 years, it's been 1 to 2% occupancy moves and, excuse me, 2 to 3% rates.
Yeah, because when you're full, you're full.
July and August has that, but now that it's when can we get in, and it's June and September and May and October, and those are where we're growing occupancy.
Okay.
That's all we're gonna look at. That you can spend some time with the line items, and we'll just have to pick this up at your meeting next week.
Which I'll be happy to attend.
Great. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay, so do we need to reorganize?
Yeah,
Start some coffee?
that too.